understanding and experience, it has great depth and variety of implementation. Not all the Muslim states implement it in the same manner. There are variations. So I wouldn't tell to which pattern Gambia is coming to fall into. What pattern of Sharia law are we going to? Show differences between Sharia law. In Saudi Arabia, for instance, which is the citadel of Islamic faith globally, Sharia law is being implemented fully, and me being at a disadvantage means I cannot practice my faith. That is how they implement it there. There is nothing like for the minority or whatever. Saudi is an Islamic state and considers only Islam and the practice of Islam. You take it or you leave it. There is no halfway. In Gambia, when we said Sharia, was it going to have that implication to me? This was what I was thinking. And it is applied in the Middle East jealously, not only Saudi, but all the other Arab countries in the Middle East, especially the Gulf. There is very much restriction of the practice of any other religion other than Islam. And I don't happen to belong to Islam. So naturally, all these things were playing part in me. I said, what form of Sharia are we going to implement in the Gambia? And who gives the answer? And who determines it? The restriction of religious practices varies. Kuwait will tell you, okay, I will allow you to build a church, but it will not be in the residential areas. Saudi will tell you, you don't even build it here at all. And Gambia, what was Gambia coming to tell me? And they are both Sharia states.
And in page 59 of your book, you went on to say that this may seem extreme and even far-fetched, but it fits perfectly into his political doctrine of reducing Gambians to the type of subservience found only in religious scripture.
Yes.
Page 59.
Page 59, last paragraph.
The first paragraph. The first paragraph. You went on to say that nothing has irked Gambians more than Yahya Jammeh's recent promise to substitute the Gambian constitution and English jurisprudence with Sharia law and the Quran as the basis of Gambian law. This may seem extreme and even far-fetched, but it fits perfectly into his political doctrine of reducing Gambians to the subservience found only in religious scripture. So you think that this was done in order to further render Gambians less pushful about their rights and move into the realm of being subservient to his wishes. In a sense, you were saying that this was all intended to perfect his dictatorship.
Very correct. Ex-President Jammeh had his vision. And in his vision, he wanted to be the sole ruler, the only ruler, the everlasting ruler. And he was not hiding it. He pronounced all these things in public. I will rule here for 1 billion years to me mean that he will be here forever and ever. He said all these things. That was his intention. And he said he would he would make sure that all the Christian schools change their names. Why give me a Christian school with St. John and St. Paul and St. Joseph and whatever it is? He made this pronouncement, I would change them all. So we knew for sure where he was heading with us. He was not hiding it. It was most uncomfortable and very frightening to all Christians and many Muslims who knew the implications of Sharia.
And apart from writing letters by various Christian organizations, some prayer meetings were held in order to stand up for the Christian faith. Could you tell us about that?
Yes. The Christian community resulted to what they are known best for. In fact, I call it the alpha and the omega of Christianity. That's the beginning and the end. That's the power that they have. Go to the Almighty and talk to him. And they believe he would listen. They held prayer sessions at the Independence Stadium. 1, 2, 3, and it continues, in which all the forces were together. That was symbolic to bring all Christians under one roof. It has never happened. So we say, Yahya was doing bad, but it yielded something beneficial. It managed to bring the Christian community together. And in the first session at the Independence Stadium, all the brothers, Muslim brothers who are related to Christians attended. So it was a Christian day of prayer, but attended by both Muslims and Christians.
How about interfaith dialogues? Did that continue during that period?
Interfaith dialogue during the time of Yahya stopped. And this is something I would like to go into at the end. At the moment, you have interfaith committee meeting, but it is not what we used to know during the First Republic.
What's the difference?
In the First Republic, the interfaith was represented by renowned Gambians, religious leaders, of Christians, of Muslims and Baha'i. It never stopped to the Muslim and Christians. The Ahmadiyyas were represented, so you can see across the board, people of all faiths were there, and that is what made it special. And the meetings were much more regular, that we call them the Muslim, Christian Muslim social group. They fraternize, they socialize, they meet regularly, and people see them. It was something visible. There was nobody around West Coast here who didn't know that there was such an interfaith dialogue. Today, as it happens, the difference is they rarely meet. The steam that was there is no longer there. And maybe the charismatic individuals, like Father Edu, who has a special charisma, is no more there. Like Babali, Imam Babali, is no more there. There are certain individuals, wherever they put their hands into, it's different. So
is this one lackluster?
Yes, that's the word.
How about the individual relationships? Is it defined by fraternity or defined by hostility?
Yeah, within the interfaith group only, or outside in society? Which one are you referring to?
The interfaith group.
Interfaith group. They rarely meet. They do meet, but it's very rare.
Are they having an impact on ensuring social cohesion and religious harmony?
I'm trying to make a comparison now between A and B. We are in B. A was much better. That is the sort of distinction. Yes, it was much better. B, we've reached a stage where you will even have a major meeting of interfaith, and these figures wouldn't be seen. For instance, not long ago, the Gambia hosted the first Senegalo-Gambia interfaith dialogue. And it hadn't that publicity, it hadn't that representation as compared to the first committee that was in force here. And the representation was very, very weak. The Gambian representation was overwhelmed by the Kaulach delegates, and the Christian representation also from the Senegalese side was none. So we had opposite to what the Muslims here experience. But still, overall, it was not well organized. And this was an international activity.
Back to the steps that Jammeh took to implement the new dispensation, that is an Islamic state. You would also include amongst them the banning of drumming music during Ramadan. Would you say that that was part of the enforcing of Islamic statehood?
Sure. Imposition of, call it, Arabic values. I'm trying to make a distinction here between Islam and Arab. At times, people put the two together so close that you don't see the distinction, which I appreciate. But yet, if you look closely and honestly, you will see the distinction. You will see a habit that you will say, this is Islamic, and another you say, no, this is not Islamic, this is only Saudi. I give an example. If I go to Kuwait, I find women driving, and he's Islamic lady. She belongs to Islam. If I go to Saudi, that woman wouldn't be able to drive, and it is still Islamic. So how they practice it in Kuwait is different from how they practice it in Saudi. So we tend to take what is Saudi and say that is Islamic.
Yes, that is true. That mistake is made sometimes. But back to this issue of the imposition of the ban on drumming. Are you suggesting that this is not Islamic and that it is perhaps Saudi?
Yes, we brought in two things. And that is why I brought in Saudi and Kuwait. We say drumming and dancing, which is on one side. We say the veil, which is on another side. The veil and how they practice it here, you will see much similarity between here and Saudi Arabia. It is a common copy of Saudi women. Not of Kuwait, not of Iranian, not of Syrian. And all these groups are Muslims. So you want to do what? To make us bore the Saudi culture of clothing, how they look like. This is not Islam, but they proclaim here, they claim it is Islam, Islamic dress, as Imam Fatih would tell you.
But would he be wrong, really?
I challenge him, that is not Islamic, that is Saudi. And I make the distinction between Saudi and Kuwait. The Kuwaitis don't do that.
But if Kuwaitis decide to implement a more relaxed rule of the veil as compared to Saudi, it doesn't necessarily mean that the Saudi version is un-Islamic.
The Saudi version is too strict, it's on the extreme end. And this is why I say you have variety.
But also, it being at the extreme end does not necessarily make it un-Islamic. Let's just agree on that and then we move on. Because it is important
it is
here.
Culture.
So
I can see
so your argument is that the wearing of the veil as it is done in Saudi Arabia is cultural and not necessarily Islamic.
That's what I mean.
Well, I'm not sure I have the competence to argue that.
A lot of practices you will not see until and appreciate until you live with them. The men, how they dress, if you see one, you say to me, it's Islamic. You may be right, but if I see it, I'm not going to say it's Islamic. I can tell whether this is a Kuwaiti tope dress, or a Saudi dress, or a Yemeni dress, or an Iranian dress. They all differ. So which one are you bringing to me to tell me this is Islamic? You bring in the Saudi one and tell me this is Islamic. Why didn't you bring this Kuwaiti one?
But all of them would have one common denominator. And that common denominator is perhaps what identifies as the Islamic part of it. Take, for instance, that one has to be adequately covered to the extent that private parts would not expose. That would be a common denominator. Say for women, the covering of the head and the neck would be the common denominator. It does not necessarily have to extend to the face. So these are the things perhaps that would make it Islamic and not necessarily Saudi. You agree with that?
Exactly. And not necessarily Saudi.
Yeah.
So what you are doing is not Saudi at all. It is Kuwaiti dress. The Kuwaiti or Yemeni dress. It is not Saudi. You can tell me, is it Islamic? The ones we put on here, is it Islamic?
Yes, because if it meets the requirements of Islam, it Gambian, be it Nigerian, be it Saudi, or be it Emirati, for as long as it meets the Islamic requirement, you can say it is Islamic. And you agree with that?
I agree, but I want you also to see that if it doesn't deny it being Islamic. If it meets up with that requirement, it is Islamic. What if it doesn't? Does it make it un-Islamic?
Yes, it would be.
I've brought my tobe and it is yellow in color, and his is white. That is the only distinction. Is it Islamic?
But no, we're not talking about colors. We're talking about other more stringent requirements.
I have brought my tobe, and it is below my knee. Is it un-Islamic?
For the woman, yes.
No, I'm talking for the man. Let's come to the woman also.
Yes, for the woman, it would be un-Islamic.
For the woman?
Yes, it would be.
Okay, for the woman, I've brought my abaya, and it is showing my neck. Is it un-Islamic?
For the woman, you expected to cover the neck.
Yes, if it doesn't, is it un-Islamic? That's my question.
Yes, it is.
So all those people in Syria are not Islam?
Not necessarily.
Yeah,
they wear the headscarf.
So you apply your common sense and you apply your own culture and it will be Islamic.
I think we are now discussing a point that is really outside the issues that we need to focus on. The important point here that we need to get into is how the steps Yahya Jammeh has taken to enforce this unilateral declaration. How has that affected the rights of Christians?
Yes.
We've talked about that it's a violation of their constitutional rights because the declaration is unconstitutional. Now, let's talk about how the steps taken have also affected the Christians. First, we discussed the issue of the imposition of the ban on drumming. And on that one, we did agree that, well, what you talked about was more of discrimination between Christians and Muslims, in the sense that it is the same ban for Ramadan is not extended to cover Lent, when both Lent and Ramadan serve almost the same purpose. That is what you suggest.
I did.
But I raised the issue that is perhaps much deeper than that. How about those who do not believe in either religion, and they believe in drumming in the exercise of their own religion? Would you say that that pronouncement, that ban, was also or represents also a violation of their rights?
Agreed.
Okay, so then let's move on. The other steps taken by Jammeh, according to your book, was the imposition of the headscarf.
Yes, please.
On all civil servants. Could you talk about that, please?
Yes. The imposition was unfair because in our culture here, Gambian culture, a woman may expose her hair up to before marriage. When she is married, then Gambia, typical Gambian society, now would expect her to cover up the hair. When this imposition came in, it just went across. Are you married or are you not married? Are you single? It didn't care. Are you a Christian? It didn't discriminate. All of them. So the people that didn't believe in it were affected. It is only probably those who accepted that as a norm, they continue. They won't see the difference. In the imposition of the ban found you doing that. So there is no difference at all. But if
I am now looking at the report of the International Religious Freedom Report for the Gambia on 2016, which was provided by the U.S. State Department, and it reads as follows, that on January 4, the President issued an executive decree requiring female government employees to wear headscarves to work. I think it also included members, those who work in other state agencies like parastatals and so forth.
It affected all.
According to media sources, the memorandum was delivered to all ministries and departments. The President's decree received attention from international media and opposition parties. On 13 January, GRTS announced the directive was lifted and female employees did not have to cover their hair.
That's right. After causing all that harassment, you now lift it up. You ask yourself, why was it introduced in the first place? And if you answer that question, probably then you can tell us why was the ban lifted. And what we understood here was he sincerely imposed the ban. Unfortunately, society compared other women with the wife and said the wife is not respecting the ban. And they were taking that as a cause for them to revolt against the ban. If the number one head of state, first lady, is not unveiled, why should the rest of society be unveiled? So finding himself in that difficult situation, the easiest was just to lift the ban. And many things like that happen. Other things which I thought were not the function of the head of state, but he's had his idea and groomed, cultivated by Zakir Naik. For instance, he went on radio denouncing bleach and skin color, skin bleaching for the head of state. He shouldn't have. That is not, to my opinion, that's not the function of the head of state. Give it rather to the Ministry of Health. They are in a better position to justify it and to convince people to stop doing it. They will give you better reasons. But he put his fingers into all. Sometimes it deals with religion, other times it deals with things far from religion, until you wonder whether he was the religious scholar he claimed to be.
But did you see that he seemed to have just been testing the waters to some extent? He would make a pronouncement, and if challenged vehemently, he tones it down or even withdraws it.
Yes.
The first is the issue of the drumming. The police later clarified that it did not affect Christian worship, correct?
That is what the police said,
yes.
But in practice they were still harassing people.
Yes, but that harassment was inconsistent with their pronouncement, at least.
Yes.
And on the second one, the imposition of the head tie, it was withdrawn almost 2 weeks.
Yes.
From the date the circular was made.
Yes.
In fact, the declaration of this thing, how Islamic State, was in December.
Yes.
And by 4th of January 2016, he had withdrawn in fact, it was 4 days later. According to this letter, according to circular number 1 of 2016, on the subject, head tie during official hours, the letter stated as follows: "This is to inform you that an executive directive has been issued that all female staff within government ministries and agencies are no longer allowed to expose their hair during working hours effective from 31st December. That was the order.
Yes.
And 2 weeks later, it was withdrawn. One would want to believe that it was withdrawn by reason of the opposition that was made. Would you agree?
The opposition and Jame has been erratic in his decision. Don't forget, all others that preceded were changed. The cemetery, the ban on the cemetery.
Let's come to that. That was another step that was taken by Jame. And you believe, well, you tell us, what do you believe was the reasons behind it?
Jame, we're moving to the cemetery issue. Jame passed an executive order advising that burial be ceased at the Christian cemetery in Banjul. And of course, all his offices, all his agents would ensure that it's implemented.
I am providing you with some documents. Take a look at it. and take us through them.
I will go through the first one, which says request to cease burial at the Christian Cemetery, Banjul. I write to convey executive directives for the stoppage of all burials in the above-named cemetery due to space constraint with immediate effect. Space constraint.
What is the date of that document?
I have a letter for this. It looks like it's in June 2016.
What is the reference number?
The reference number is ADM 131/377.
And this is also captured in page 105 of your book.
It must be. I just want to confirm.
Yeah.
105. Yes.
So we don't
Request to cease burial. Yes.
Yes. So this is already in the book. So we do not necessarily exhibit the documents I have given you.
It is there.
All right. So and there's a response by the Christian Council. Could you take us through that? That should be on the next page of the book, page 106, but the document is also provided to you. It's easier to use the book because that's the exhibit. Use the book, page 106.
Request to cease burial. This is 23rd June. 23rd June.
And this was a letter to the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Lands, correct?
Yes, please.
And it was signed by the 3 bishops.
Yes, please.
The Methodist bishop, that's Most Reverend Hannah C. Falheim, and Most Reverend James A.Y. Odiko, and Most Reverend Robert P. Ellison.
Correct.
Yeah. And tell us the gist of the letter.
They conducted an inspection of the cemetery. In fact, the letter that came to council should have written to Christian Council. It went to the Catholic Diocese, and I believe it was a weekend, and they dropped it at the GPI rather than at the bishop's office. And at the GPI, it went, call it to the wrong person, to the Vicar General, who was Father Emil at that time. And it was on a Sunday, or it coincided with a funeral. There was an activity in the church, and he received it. So he announced it to the parishioners and informed them that as a result of the seizure, ban to stop burying in the cemetery, they will conduct an inspection at the cemetery. So they all gathered at the cemetery, and the parishioners also gathered, and Bishop Odiko, as I remember, was also there, and the crowd was huge. The people from the government, from state, who wanted to inspect the cemetery were overwhelmed because of the huge number of people who wanted to witness this. They made a compromise and reduced the people, asked them to go off quietly, and representatives conducted the inspection. And the secretary at that time, who came from the state, reported that he was a mere messenger. Maybe he was panicked and wanted to disclose to the people that this is not an action originating from him. He made it clear, I'm a mere messenger. Whatever I do here, I will write my report and I would inform you. The report came eventually, and the Christian community, due to the inspection report by the engineers, staff from physical planning, they concluded this cemetery was not full. Actually, there was much space, and to their estimate, it would take the Christian community more than 50 years to fill that space.
But would you say that perhaps this was more an error of judgment than an attempt to interfere with the rights of Christians?
He was definitely interfering with the rights of Christians, hitting them everywhere, right and center. Whether he succeeds or not, he would just continue hitting them. But it's the same pattern.
Okay, let's examine that. Because we have to be fair and address each point dispassionately, objectively, in order to arrive at the correct conclusion. You would agree that the Muslim cemetery was separated by perhaps less than 5 meters from the Christian cemetery.
Agreed.
And you would agree that the Muslim cemetery was considered as full at some stage.
Agreed.
And you would agree that by reason of the fact that it was considered full, it was moved to Carnifing.
I will qualify that later.
It was moved to Carnifing.
Yes, I will agree, but I will have to qualify that later.
Please do so now.
The Muslim cemetery was also, in addition to what you have said, was affected by erosion. So that definitely limited the space available.
Yes.
There was sea erosion.
That all boils down to the fact that there was no longer any space that was suitable for burial, correct?
Therefore they moved, yes.
Yes, and therefore it was removed and moved to Carnifing.
Agreed.
So equally, if the Christian cemetery was seen or believed to be full, it is no violation of the rights of the Christians if another space is provided.
Yes, but there was no reason to believe that it was full. See, if it is full, it becomes a public health hazard. It is not state house issue. The public health department, the environmental health department would have taken it up. They see what is happening and they would react to it.
So
the mere fact that it is coming not from the health authorities and not either from the Banjul City Council, but rather from State House, would tell you a lot.
So your complaint is one of procedural irregularity and not necessarily the violation of a right of the Christians.
He was irregular, and irregular in his hitting of the Christian community. To Yaya, it doesn't matter. As long as I reach my target, and who is the target? That's the Christian community. Whether I hit them justifiably or not, he was a dictator.
Yes, that is not the point that is being discussed, whether he was a dictator. The question is whether that decision was motivated by a desire to hit the Christians, or was it motivated by other reasons?
By the desire to hit at the Christians.
That's your opinion. That's your evidence. But when you provided evidence of the fact that the cemetery can still accommodate more graves, the decision was changed.
Changed.
Okay. So wouldn't you think that if the decision was solely intended to attack the Christians and violate their rights, then perhaps it would not have been changed simply because the pretext at which it was made was found to be untrue?
No, if the pretext was found to be untrue, you withdraw. Because you cannot justify it with that pretext. That was not the real reason. The real reason, you never mention it to anybody. But people know the real reason. He didn't say, you Christian, go out, I hate you, I will take your cemetery because I hate you, I dislike you. No, he just gives you an excuse. It is full, you go.
Yes, but when it was showed not to be full, he withdrew the decision.
Yes, and the pressure applied, he knew he couldn't. Just like all the other proclamations. He would bring it in, just like the head tie ban, just like drumming. It's just the same pattern. Just like the declaration he made in Birkama. All these things, they follow each other.
We would come to that. So your position is that if the Christians hadn't challenged his decision and provided empirical evidence that this place is not full,
agreed,
he would have stuck to the decision.
They took a very stiff resistance. I can remember that day. Even some Christian communities went on their own to buy T-shirts and give it to people free to come and stand and blockade the cemetery. It was most unexpected that they would react that way.
In your book, you quoted, you rather reprinted an article written by Matthew K. Jallo.
Yes, please.
I must say, a very well written article. And it's about the Gambia desecrating the Christian cemetery, yes, corruption of Islam, impunity gone too far. So I will read out an excerpt of that, and I would want to find out whether this is how the Christian community viewed Yahya Jammeh's actions. And it reads as follows. I'm reading from page 108 to page 109, and I read as follows. It says, quote, Yahya Jammeh's recent efforts to test the resolve of the Christian community is a familiar pattern that, over 2 decades, permitted him the pleasure of gradually seizing on citizens' perceived weaknesses, exploit their fears in his perennial quest to leave his stamp on every aspect of Gambian life. This has resulted in the alarming integration of the military regime and Islam as an institution, altered the constitutional secularity of the state, and evolved a mutual relationship that is purely political in nature. Islam in the Gambia has effectively been turned into an accessory of the state, with Muslim leaders assuming willingly or forcibly preeminent roles in the harmful subjugation of citizens and psychologically wrecking of the collective Gambian psyche. Evidently, Yahya Jammeh has taken his control of the institution of Islam in the Gambia to the extreme, very often obliging Muslim clerics to participate in his ritual idol worship, to the chagrin of young Muslim scholars. The heads of Islam in the Gambia, Imam Ratib Chernoka of Banjul Mosque, and chairman of the Gambia Supreme Islamic Council, Imam Momadou Lamin Toure, Gunjur, have morphed into cheerleaders of Yahya Jammeh and appendages of the regime, having long ago succumbed to coercion into silence and detachment from the state-sanctioned crimes against the Gambian people. Until recently, Christianity as an institution has been the holy grail of Gambia's rabid politics of divisions. But the recent burial of eminent dissident radio journalist George Christensen at the Banjul Cemetery has again awoken the evil in Yahya Jammeh and triggered his challenge of one of the oldest and most powerful institutions in the Gambia, the church. Unquote. What do you say to that?
Matthew was my senior at school. We know each other very well. both of us were in St. Augustine's, though he was 1 year or 2 ahead of me. But we know each other and we've been related with each other up till today.
But these are very strong words.
Yes.
It seems to suggest that Yahya Jammeh has hijacked the religion of Islam and was weaponizing it against the Christians.
Yahya succeeded in many ways. And at this juncture, we were in constant communication, discussing the way forward. Those of us who were still in Gambia and those in the diaspora. And we discussed this particular subject, and this was the view that take up your stand there. Don't allow him to ride over your heads as he has done with the Islamic Council. They cited example. They say he succeeded in overcoming them, paddling his way through. But you, being there on the ground, don't accept it. I think that Matthew here was attempting also to embolden us here not to give in. And he was able to achieve that. When we saw this communication, we said, "Wahna diga kay." Let's stand up. We saw it happen with the burial of Fode
Makalo.
No. Balde, what's his first name?
Buba
Balde. Because Buba was in the same group, in the same class. So all these things hurt us. We were bitter. Christensen was in the same class. So you are talking to a crop of St. Augustine students belonging to the same class, whether it's Buba was called Nyebe at school, whether it was Christensen, and these two were denied burial by Yahya Jammeh. You can see how bitter the group felt against Yahya.
But people argue that apart from these cosmetic steps Yahya Jammeh took to implement or to solidify his Islamic State, it was just political pandering to the Islamic states because he has lost the West as development partners. What do you say to that?
I've heard that narrative. One cannot dispel it because it was happening at the same time. Yes, he lost faith in the West, and the other option would have been the Arabic War. As much as that is true, he would have gone ahead with it to make sure that that vision of his, apart from being the Arabic state, it would have been an emulation of the Iranian style of revolution, different from the Saudi type of revolution, where he probably was getting his money from.
Are you suggesting he wanted to be Ayatollah?
Exactly.
That is your testimony.
He said, Babali Mansal to hear. We all heard him.
Well,
it was not strange to ears when he said, I am Babali Mansal, I will rule here for 1,000 or billion years,
well,
whatever he said.
He was made Nasiruddin, but a title
right.
he rejected afterwards.
Yes, when people are conscious of what they are doing and take up their stand, you can never defeat society.
So your position is that he wanted to be Ayatollah.
He wanted to.
He wanted to be supreme Islamic leader of Gambia. That is your testimony.
Yes, and he thought he would. It was only the election 2016 that changed his course.
We thought he wanted to be king.
He wanted to be Ayatollah. Okay, Ayatollah and king, because those days, the king of those days were also religious leaders. They combined the two. Those kings were ruling the church and the state. just like Ayatollah here, or Nasiruddin here, or Babali Mansell here, who at some gathering will talk pure politics and others he will talk pure religions.
You talked about Birkama when he insulted the Christians. Could you tell us more about that?
It was most embarrassing. It was at a rally in Birkama, but equally very irritating and disturbing to the Christian community. He took the position similar to Zakir Naik. If you know these two, you can always see the similarity. His was to attack on religion and Christianity and belittle it, and he borrowed a lot of phrases from Zakir. Zakir said, I know the Bible better than the Pope, and Yahya went to Birkama and said, I know the Bible better than the Christians. It's the same language. Zakir's advice, Yahya said, you form the majority. You are 95% here Muslims. That's a huge number. You should turn this country into an Islamic state. And Jammeh went to Birkama Garden and said, Gambia will be Islamic, we form the majority. He was using the same language as Zakir Naik.
But even that said, let's call a spade a spade. It is the Constitution would always represent the sovereign will of the people, and the sovereign will of the people would obviously be carried by the majority that would form that threshold to carry a constitution through. You would accept that?
And I will qualify that. As much as a democratic state will tell you majority by the constitution and majority votes count, it will also, and it will never fail to say, protect the right of the minority.
That is perfect, and I thought that is important to elicit. In as much as a Gambian Muslim majority may, in their sovereign will, decide to put in place an Islamic state, it still would have an obligation in that case to protect minority rights. Is
Yes.
that a conclusion?
Yes, this is what they will proclaim and advocate. Because if you happen to be in the majority, that is a viewpoint which you would adopt. And if you happen to be in the minority, it's a different viewpoint, completely
But
different.
the bottom line in that would be that minority rights must be protected to the full.
Yes.
Would you agree with
Yes,
that?
yes.
Okay, but that is for the future, and I do not want us to go beyond our mandate and offer prescriptions or suggestions for the future, especially in view of the work of the TRRC that is going on. But the problem with Jammeh's pronouncement was not necessarily the fact that it could be done. It was how he proposed to go about it. Would you agree?
I'll put it this way. Jammeh failed because of the processes he had adopted. He was just a bulldozer, not using his head, but using his might more of the time. Just forced things, and he collapsed.
So when he made that pronouncement in Birkama, he was saying something that the Gambian people, in the collective expression of their sovereign will, could do, but what he could not as a person or as leader.
What he couldn't do,
Yes.
he introduced a subject which he believed was the correct path, which Gambians should adopt, which would promote his own ego.
And you think that was the wrong path?
Yes.
Good. So now let us move on from this issue of declaration, the unilateral declaration of a Christian state, of an Islamic state. We all agree it was unconstitutional, it was ultra-virus, it was definitely void. So we now move on to the other issues. I have received a list of other complaints that had been made by the Christian community. I will take you through them to see whether these are complaints that you also share. And one is the re-registration of churches. The churches, there were two limbs to this. One is that there was a denial, an embargo on registration of new churches, and the other is the requirement for re-registration of existing churches. What can you say about that?
Yes, I can say such. I will refer to one here which says registration of new churches. And it was addressed to the Gambia Christian Council.
If you, I can send you one of the documents you provided. It captures the issue. Yes, I would send it to you. This is the registration of new churches. It's 27 February 2012.
No, that's the one I have. Tell him that's the one I have. It's the same. Yes, give it, return it. I have it. It says, I herewith forward the attached correspondence conveying executive directive that no new churches should be registered until further notice.
This is dated February
2012.
27, 2012. Mr. Chair, yes. We asked to put this document in evidence. Could you provide a copy to the chairman to take a look at?
Yes. The issue with this registration ban of new churches is that...
Okay. Mr. Chair, the book would be 116A, and this should be 116B, exhibit 116B, if admitted.
Sorry, did I hear you correctly? 116B?
B, yes.
Oh, thank you. Request granted.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. What is the impact of this document?
Yeah, the impact is, it is too long. The time it was released, nobody knew for exactly what was the reason. So you tend to hold on, thinking that you would come to learn the reason. And the longer you wait, the more, of course, time goes on and no action takes place until you think that probably next month an order letter would come to say that now you can resume. You keep on hoping against hope. Next month, next year, until we are now in 2020, and this was written in 2012. Up till today, a follow-up to this letter has been anticipated. The implication is new churches cannot be erected because of this ban. If you have the reason, you have the population expansion, and you want to
but did you ask for a reason?
Yes, people, even as far back as last week, I was in consultation with members of the Christian community who were interested in erecting churches, or those who were affected when they wanted to erect their own churches. The bottom line is, up till today, with all the inquiry, with the registration office, they cannot get it lifted. And they all quote to this letter when you go for registration. They will always quote to this letter. There is a ban.
So therefore, you think this is an infringement of the rights of Christians to establish their own places of worship?
Exactly so. It is infringement onto the Christian community. Because when you say a mosque, a church, I'm not thinking of a mosque, I'm not thinking of a synagogue. So, again, it is targeted. Whom? The Christian community.
How about the other one? The re-registration of churches. That is churches that had already been legally registered by the government and operating in the country were asked to re-register. How do you perceive that?
As government control mechanism. Again, too, it is the hands of government into religion. Want to control it for whatever reason they have in mind. If you want to register, you have to come to me. And when you come to me, I simply don't register it.
There is suggestions that for some churches, their applications had been pending for some 10 years, some 15 years, some 4 years, some 5 years.
As I mentioned, this is already 8 years and it is still pending. So if somebody says to me 10 years, I definitely will not argue with him.
And you think that is an undue restriction on your rights?
It is too much restriction.
There is also suggestions that there is a restriction on residential permits for non-Gambian pastors. Are you aware of that?
No.
You're not aware of that?
No.
Okay.
But if somebody says to me there is, I will not deny it. I'll just keep quiet. I will not deny it. I'll just keep quiet because I don't know.
How about the imposition of Islamic teachers on private Christian schools?
This has an effect, yes. See, government has not been uniform, and probably this is why it is better for government, if you cannot be uniform, if you cannot apply the laws, your rules and regulations across the board, don't apply it, don't introduce it. I give a scenario where I said a family has 2 sons. One was 8 years and the other was 4. And it was feast day, independence celebration. He bought new dress, new shoes, everything for the 8-year-old boy. And for the 4-year-old boy, he bought nothing. And his reason, he gave reason. People always have their own reasons. I don't have enough money, I cannot afford it. That was his reason. He couldn't afford it. But you can afford to give to one full requirement, all his needs, and to the other 0. You see, I cannot afford it. You are developing hatred amongst the two. Both are your children. But all that you get is bitter hatred between the two. Government should be applying fair regulation across the board. If I want to deregister religious faith, let it be religious faith. But to say I'm regulating the Christian faith, then I keep asking myself, why? I can perceive the difficulty for government to share resources across the board. But if you cannot, as I cited example, do for none, and probably this is why we advocate a neutral state.
In effect, what you are saying is that this is just discrimination.
It is discriminatory.
And not necessarily a restriction on the exercise of your religious freedoms.
Well, if I am restricting your right to exercise your freedom, it's your human right which I am also infringing upon.
Yes, we would agree to that, but this is basic discrimination, providing for Islamic education and not providing for Christian education.
Yes, it is discrimination. Others will call it preferential treatment. You can call it many, many adjectives, but it comes to the same thing. You are discriminated one from the other.
But would it in fact amount to that in view of the fact that where this intervention is done by government, there is already the possibility of Christian education? Because this is done in schools that are Christian schools. Say, for instance, they send a an Islamic teacher at St. Augustine's High School.
Okay.
That school is already able to provide education on Bible knowledge to those who need it.
By whom? It is the same thing. It is the same thing. Go to St. Therese. Yes, St. Augustine is one example, but I'm going to St. Therese School. I provided you with a Quranic teacher, and I pay for the entire expenses. The Christians, they have something similar to a Quranic teacher, and they call them the catechist. Provide one and pay salaries.
But that is already provided for by the school by reason of the composition and the constitution of the school itself. So it wouldn't be necessary, because it appears to me that this is government trying to fill the gap. Would you agree or you don't?
Yes, the gap is filled up to a point where it is on level. You feel it, it's not level.
That's your
Yes.
opinion. Okay, thank you. So let's move on to the next point. The commission, I believe, would have the elements to be able to make up its mind on these things as to whether it goes one way or the other. So we would leave it at that. The next point is harassment of Muslims who have converted into Christianity. Are you aware of any such experiences?
I only heard the stories. A convert said it to me, but I have never experienced it. I'm not a convert myself. What happened is he was narrating his story, and this is not unique, that he converted and had an argument with the wife and went to the court and went to the Qadi court, and the decision was made against him. The judgment was made against him. He lost everything he had. He lost the wife. He lost his property, according to him. I have to go to the court to find out whether that is true or not. These are narratives. Another incident where this convert to Christianity was kicked out of the family, and he lost all that he had with the family. He almost ran away from them and is hiding. I've had another one in which this was a Christian renting a house in a Muslim home, and he was given a short notice of few days to leave the house. He was surprised, and he was asking himself, why should he behave like this? He gathered guts and went to the landlord and inquired, and the landlord said, last Sunday your friends came here, I had them making prayers, I never knew that you are not a Muslim. There are many.
But you would realize, Mr. Saine, that these are in fact social problems, as they would happen to Christians who have converted to Islam. They can also happen as it happened rather to Muslims who have converted to Christianity. It can also happen to Christians who have converted into Islam. So these are social problems that do not necessarily equate to the violation of rights. This is just intolerance of the people.
That's right. It points at the level where this country has reached. Things that never used to happen are happening today. Stories that I would have denied 10 years ago or 10 years ago, I would have said, no, it's not possible. These things are now happening in the country. The previous administration cultivated this, and it is just getting bigger and bigger, not smaller at all.
The other issue you raised is demolition of a church construction in Senegambia area.
This particular church, very close to Senegambia, was not on the highway. It was deep down, and not this normal Senegambia route. If you come to the paved road, the road coming from where they call New Road, coming into Senegambia, it is within that locality. The church was being constructed. The saddest thing is the time they give the notice and the time they demolish it is only a few days. It just looks like they hated you from the onset and they just don't want to listen to you. If I serve a notice, I would go to the court and wait for that period of time for the defendant who was given a license to construct to argue his license, but he's got all the proper documentation. And you've given only 2 days to demolish it. It was too harsh. These things are showing something else that never used to happen in Gambia. Even if I had cause to, I would appeal to you and give you 1 month notice. We are all familiar with 1 month notice. Even I want you out of my compound, I'll give you 1 month notice. But don't come 2 days. That shows the vengeance, the bitterness in people's heart, which never used to happen. These are the symptoms of today.
But perhaps that action could also be explained by other reasons, like, say, violation of the conditions of the permit. Could that have been a reason?
And we go and testify to that. I don't give you 2 days.
But if there
yes,
is...
I want to prove that you have violated the license. There is somewhere that we can go and prove that out. Or at least involve the physical planning or the building.
Who did the demolition?
The person who served the notice, they said GT board, tourism board.
GT board?
Yes.
That is a different case, because if the mosque is being built in the TDA area, that is a completely, the church is being built in the TDA area, that is a completely different thing, because the TDA is governed by the GT board.
That is true. And the GT board is only controlling the church. We need to signs that people see and read and get a lot of meaning. A mosque is allowed not too far in the same locality. yet you deny to A, grant it to B. Now, who is doing all this? It looks like it is being perpetrated by the central government. All this happened during the time of Yaya.
So your case, therefore, is premised on three important prongs. One is a direct attack or restriction on the rights of Christians, so to speak. That is one, and that includes the unilateral declaration of Gambia as an Islamic state.
It is the same story. He put it in words, and here he's putting it in action. I will change all your school titles, your school names. Don't call it Saint this, Saint Joseph, Saint Mary. I will change your title. All your religious sisters, I will make sure that I remove their veils and get them married. The priest, what you are doing in hiding with the altar boys, you think, these are whole hateful language coming from the #1 citizen, the president of the state. So when all these things spread in the nation, it is anticipated, it is expected. People listen to the head of state and they do exactly what he is telling them.
And the second issue, as you call it, is the harassment of Christians in the exercise of their faith, say by reason of the anti-drumming ban and use of other hateful language.
Yes.
And the third point you raise is the issue of the discrimination. What is done for Muslims is not done for Christians. That is your case.
Yes, please, yes.
All right. Thank you very much. I have no further questions for you. I would hand over to the chair for the commissioners to ask other questions. But perhaps before I do so, I'll just ask one last question. We have seen that the attack on Muslim clerics involved unlawful imprisonment, on a lot of torture and and exile. Have you ever seen any such attacks on Christians, like unlawful detention, like torture, like exile? Has it ever happened?
I have heard of one. I haven't witnessed it. I heard of two. I inquired. I never witnessed any of them. The first one was a Nigerian who was physically harassed, beaten, slapped, whilst he was in a procession, religious prayer. They attacked him on the road. And the attack continued up to his church. Whilst he is leading the congregation, they would come and shout foul languages onto him. And the diocese just resolved that by changing him, asking him to go, because he was a Nigerian, and they brought in a typical Gambian Catholic priest to replace him, and that was how it was resolved. The other one, I inquired because they said the priest was attacked and arrested, but he said to me, and that is Father Edu, at the peak of the crisis, he said to me, no, dañoo wax rek, meaning that it was unfounded. These are the two physical attacks. And I will make a comparison because I heard of the testimony coming from the Muslim fraternity. It looks like they harassed them much more, intimidated them much more, jailed them much more than the Christian community. Perhaps that has something to do with the proportion, population proportion. There are fewer Christians here.
Or perhaps it was not necessarily intended for just religious purposes, but for Yahya Jammeh's efforts to solidify his dictatorship, as you previously mentioned.
Yes.
But thank you very much for answering my questions. I now hand over to the chair.
Thank you very much indeed, my counsel, and thank you, Mr. Saine, for your testimony. During these years of harassment and intimidation of the Christian community here in the Gambia, did the community receive any help, I don't know in what form, from Christian communities outside the Gambia, say in our sub-region, West Africa, or the African region, or even outside our own region? If indeed the community was supported, what was the form of support besides some of just perhaps issuing press releases and other things?
Yes, I can remember when the Papal Nuncio, that's the representative of Vatican, heard these stories. He wanted to come and find out for himself to see what is happening in Gambia. So the message reached him, our outcry reached him, and he came down to visit. He strengthened us and gave us hope. That was the support. And he further said, we've all heard of your predicament going on in this country, but we want to reassure you that you are not alone. This was the support, moral support, encouragement. And he did that within there were 2 visits that followed each other within a very short period of time. That has been unprecedented. For Vatican representative to leave his station and come to Gambia and visit and go back and come back. So that caught the attention of the Christian community. Yes, we are not alone. They were all encouraged. Another one that was received was from Senegal. The Archbishop heard about the issues coming up in Gambia. And to the best of my knowledge, he encouraged all the Gambians and promised that God will be with them and will listen to their prayers. But rumors now, I have no testimony of this. It was rumored that he further used his influence to make sure that during the voting, no Senegalese from Casamance or from Kaolack comes in to vote. That he used a strategy to ensure that Gambians only are left with their country to vote. Whether this is true or not, but this is the story that reached me.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Was there any démarche by the community here to reach any international organizations and protesting this development in the Gambia? I.e., did the community here write to the Secretary General of the UN or the head of the African Union raising this issue at all?
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioners, if you have any questions, please go ahead. And Commissioner Kinte, you have the floor.
Mr. Saine,
Yes.
we, on behalf of the Gambian people and the religious fraternity, we definitely sympathize with you, the various harassment and intimidation over the period. This has been prevalent in the Gambia, as you, in your last remarks, all the religions are affected, all the individuals are affected. It was only, as our elite council said, way of consolidating his dictatorship. All the means were applied. I have one interesting thing in your revelations. You said earlier on in childhood and until of late, drumming was not part of your performance in worship. It became an innovation. I'm not sure whether you recognize the incompatibility of the innovation to the social, the usual social cohesion and fraternity that has been happening between us as people of the same. Because yes, you have said in Saudi you were only one person, probably among 100. You did not feel lonely, and you have not seen any indicators of segregation. That's far away. In Banjul here, you told us the Imam Ratib will hug the priest in honoring their district. And you will even on Fridays, you will go and beat the drum and so on. It was so harmonious. Now, if we're going on in that way, my opinion is any innovation we are introducing should be sensitive to the culture. It looks like lost has been done on site, these issues. That's one thing I deducted. The other is, since the innovation came and drumming has become part of your worship, and there is nowhere in Islam that drumming has become part of the worship. So banning drumming in Ramadan cannot be equated to banning drumming in
church.
No, not the church, in the land. Yeah, because this one with Christianity is compatible. With Islam is incompatible. So unless we don't want to be realistic, we wouldn't want to equate the two. 3, normally Sundays you have service, it's in a confined room also. In a confined room, if you want, you can fine-tune your volume to a level that outside, even few meters outside, the noise will not be realized. But on the other hand, the Eid is usually announced quite long time before it comes, a number of hours or so in some instances. In some instances, in fact, days, like Eid al-Adha. Now, if those people who were involved there knew the Muslims were performing their Eid, maybe the same time, concurrently, the two were taking place. What was wrong for them to recognize that noise, these people are not making any noise that is disturbing our worship? And the noise is not part of their worship. Do we control our noise so that we don't become nuisance to them? Because if we do, they will either conclude that we are provocating or we are insensitive. Either of them can result to agitation. Of course, I expect them also, the Muslims, to be tolerant and understand the individual differences in perception, whatever, psychology, and so on. But looking at the two, I think these were issues we had to look at. Probably my third point is foreign culture. If we're trying to incorporate foreign culture or foreign ways of doing things, we have to make sure we don't compromise our own type of it. We don't allow ours to be inferior, especially if it has implications. If it is common in Nigeria to be drumming, dancing, and whatever, in worship, and then that was not what was inherent in the Gambia in the previous moments, and we lived harmoniously. We don't allow them to introduce that, unless we test it and confirm that it is compatible and adaptive. That's my opinion. I don't know what you have.
Maybe I will give a short response. Most of these things happening, they are just symptoms of intolerance. If we stop to address them, they will just grow worse. So the earlier we stop them, do something about them, the better. And the best people who could do something about that is the leaders, the leadership. If the leaders tolerate and accept themselves, each other, the population in general will accept each other. We tolerate each other because we understand it. But if we don't accept each other, I am already biased. I'm seeing nothing but evil in you. So I'm ready to explode. Yes, these are the things happening in our society, and we know where it is coming from. Talking about music, drumming, in the traditional Gambian churches, music was being supplied by human voice and the piano and the organ. These were the norms. Now, it was the need for the church, not the Gambian church, but the African church, eager to Africanize. They started looking at issues and said, no, this is foreign. This belongs to the Europeans. Why we have our drums and they brought their guitars and their organ. We don't know the organ. Let's use what is typical of us. And the church listened to them and accepted the opinion. Maybe they didn't want friction between them. The church is universal. Those in Europe introduced it here until at a time the African churches said, all these instruments don't belong to us. We are going to our local musical instrument. And then the head church said, okay, music is music. Whether it's coming from the guitar or coming from organ, wanted to give freedom to all of them. Didn't want to say they were against Africans. Africans demanded it, it was given to them. And so today, the church accepts it as part of the liturgy, part of the prayers. The people inside know the rhythm that it gives. Just like in olden days, the drum was used to transmit message and different messages. So inside the church, the drum beat will tell me from outside what part of the prayers they are in. I can tell, just by the drum beat. So it serves some purpose, and people will get used to it, and they are doing it. I agree also that in the early days when we were growing up, we didn't know, say, church and drum don't go together. I know that even when it was a feast day, the Muslims would be busy beating the drum. It was a Christian feast, and they would celebrate it with us. And they will be beating the drums until they are a few meters approaching the church. All of a sudden they stop until they pass over. Then they resume the drum. This was beautiful. These were indicators of harmony, religious tolerance, and respect for each other. We have lost all those things today. It's sad.
Thank you very much indeed. There are no further. Oh, yes, Deputy Chair, you have the floor. Please
okay,
proceed.
thank you very much. Just one small clarification.
Yes, please.
On the issue of the Manjagos.
Yes.
Were the Manjagos Christians who were practicing their traditional burial rites for elderly people, or were they non-Christians?
Yes. The church, when evangelizing, is aware that it's coming in contact with people of different culture, different habit. And as long as your practice is not offensive to Christianity, they allow it to flow. Now, when they perceive it as dangerous to the faith, they preach it and try to stamp it out. This area of music, and it's typical in the Manjago and Jola clan here, despite the fact that they have embraced Christianity and they call themselves Christians, when they have an elderly person who passed away, they have a cultural rites to perform. It's not only the beating of the drum, there are other rituals that will go with it. Now, this is not a Christian belief, but it is a traditional culture, and the church is aware of it, and maybe knows that it is futile trying to stop it. They will beat. If you reach such an age in the Manjago or Jola clan and you die, they will come to the house, a type of drum and a type of dance. It's also different. Type of drum and a type of dance that they would do. This is being done, and there are some others. The church hasn't seen anything wrong with it and just turns a blind eye, allow it to go on. The one that the church doesn't hesitate to try to put a stop is to sacrifice an animal. Again, in these two tribes, in such incidents, they would spill blood, shed blood of an animal, and put it in a visible area in front of the main entrance to the house. The church doesn't like that and has been trying for a long time to put a stop to it. Sometimes you just come and fight with people, but they will not leave it.
So in a sense, what you are saying is that these people were Christians, but who were carrying out their traditional rites.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Imam C, you have the floor, please.
Thank you for the clarification.
What
I want to ask you is about the time that you were in Saudi Arabia. You spent a long time there. How were you going about your religion while living there?
In
terms of going to church or just carrying out your religious activities?
I have answered this question in many quarters amongst the Christians. This is the first time I'm hearing this question from a Muslim. The restriction in Saudi is severe, very serious. Churches are not allowed. Worshipping in any other form other than Islam is not allowed. Carrying a symbol of faith not belonging to Islam is also not allowed. How did I feel? It is equally the Saudi psyche to be very respectful to an American or a British. Even where you need to queue, they realize that you are an American, they give you preference. if they have any item, be it water, bottled water, manufactured in America, they give it preference. A vehicle made in America, they give it preference. It is in the Saudi psyche. And these were the things that helped me not to feel uncomfortable. Equally to the Saudi culture, if your skin color is black, you are a Sudanese or an American. They know black American. They know Sudanese. Skin color, they will conclude you are either Sudanese, and they listen to your words. If you speak Arabic, halas, you are Sudanese. If you speak English, you are British American. And Philip has to carry that name, so when they see the name, they brand me amongst them. When they see me and I cannot speak Arabic, I speak English, they say he's a black American. And they treat me like an American and give me all the privileges of an American. I enjoyed it. Maybe that was unique in me, but that was how comfortable I was. And they received me like an American. But when they receive you like a Sudanese, woe be on you. You will be negatively discriminated against. No privileges for you. Another thing that helped me is I was in the midst of Gambian Muslims. They are all Muslims, but they are Gambians. And that Gambianness is so great. They will know that I'm coming. They receive me at the airport. And we do everything together. And when it is time for pilgrimage, the pilgrims are coming from Gambia, I join them. I go all the way to Mecca. I go to the airport, I proceed beyond the airport, I proceed into Medina. People used to wonder, how come Philip can do this? And some of the Gambian pilgrims, when they see me, they say, they come back home, they say, Kerchen bobu moba. But it's because I was with them. We know that the Gambian pilgrims are coming. We go take some money, we buy something to receive them, things like fruits and water, to receive them at the airport. And they see me distributing. And they know me as a Christian here. And they see me distributing water call it Jeddah, when they just arrived. It was a beautiful experience for me.
Thank you very much. There are no further questions. If you have any closing remarks to make, please proceed to do so now.
Commissioner, Lead Counsel, Commissioners, I am carried away by my youthful experience of Banjul. And I grew up and brought that to the West Coast. Up to this date, the friends I associated with at school, in the primary school, up to St. Augustine's, then we scattered, and we are back in the Gambia. And now, instead of 4, we are only 3 Christians. Instead of 24, we are now 20 Muslims. And we meet regularly. Nothing can taint that relationship. There's nothing on earth. When this draft constitution came up, the issues surrounding it, we chatted over it, we laughed over it. Sometimes one of our colleagues who was in America, a Muslim, of course, came and met us discussing it. Then he said, "Yen utingena Americans ide, but Americans ide yo hulobe here." But here, we quarrel. We become emotional about the issues. As soon as the issue is completed, the day is over, we forgot about it. Back to our friendship. This is what I fear we are about to lose in this country. And I am seeing signals of that. And I would dread to see Gambia losing that prestige of being a peaceful nation. I used to say it's not only in Gambia, but Senegal as a whole. What you find here is unique. Nowhere else. I have traveled wide. I haven't seen it anywhere else. If we only know how much it is and how people appreciate it, we will hold on to it and will not allow anything to taint this cohesion, this interfaith relationship, these intermarriages, and eating in one plate. This is typical Gambian. Instead of allowing us to borrow foreign practices and beliefs, and it's creeping in. Some who are carried away with this belief, they are passionate. They believe 100% they are doing the correct thing. That Gambians are not living the best of Islam. I asked them, what is the best of Islam? I found the best of Islam in Gambia, not in Saudi. The best Muslims I encountered were Gambians, not Saudis. The way Gambians tolerate each other and accept each other and embrace each other and live and sleep in the same bed and intermarry, it's only in the Gambia. Don't tell me what you have seen outside, that we are inferior. Ours is not perfect. Let's not allow us to be deceived. We should borrow what is beneficial. What is advantageous, we take. What is at our disadvantage, we isolate. This is my advice. The interfaith committees that we had here, interfaith dialogue, I would like to see that happen again. The people that were participating in it, they were passionate about it, and they would meet regularly. And they are still here. I can see them. Only if they could come back together and hold on, Gambia will survive. They did it here. It happened. Peace, unity, harmony. They are still here. The Reverend Gabi Allen and the Imam Babali, they are still here. They saw it being nurtured and it was successful. And if our government, if there is anywhere to support, to finance, to put their resources, it would have been in either in the Islamic Council, the Christian Council, and in the Interfaith Committee. This interfaith was bringing the two faiths together and has that capacity. Strengthen them, and we will see peace and harmony. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, for those wise words and advice as well. And thank you for coming to testify before the Commission. This brings us to the end of our proceedings today. We will resume tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock sharp. Thank you all. Meeting is adjourned.